What if Pharaoh's daughter never found Moses? Exodus rewritten. Picture the Nile at dawn. Papyrus sighs. A woven basket drifts in quiet circles, sunlight soft on the reeds. In the familiar story, a princess sees it, feels something stir, and everything turns. But what if no royal footsteps came down that bank? What if that small, floating heartbeat slipped past the one hand that would lift it into a palace, into legend, into the center of a story told for thousands of years? Let's ground ourselves in the canonical path first, so we know what we're changing. The book of Exodus opens on a people growing in number and hope, and that hope frightens a new Pharaoh who doesn't remember Joseph. He turns fear into policy. Labor camps rise. Bricks stack into cities. Then comes an order that chills the river. Hebrew baby boys are to be thrown into the Nile. In that darkness, a Levite woman hides her child. 3 months of courage, 3 months of quiet. When the cries become too loud, she lines a small basket with pitch, places her baby inside, and sets him among the reeds. His sister watches from a distance. This is the hinge. Pharaoh's daughter comes to bathe. She hears a cry. She opens the basket and sees a child. She knows exactly what he is and what the orders are. And she acts against them with a single, compassionate decision. She adopts him. He grows as a prince of Egypt, fluent in the rhythms of the court and the language of empire. One day, he sees a Hebrew being beaten and intervenes with deadly force. The next day, he flees. In the wilderness, tending sheep, he meets flame that does not consume. A voice calls from the bush, names itself I Am, and sends him back to confront the throne he once walked beneath. Then come the plagues, water to blood, frogs, gnats, darkness, the tension winding tighter with each sign. Finally, a night of marking doorposts and hushed prayers. In the morning, the Exodus. A people step out from the shadow of brick kilns. The sea parts, the wilderness opens, a mountain shakes, and law is given. A nation is born in covenant. That's the familiar arc. Every beat linked to the last. But now, breathe in and shift the wind just slightly. What if the basket floats by and no princess ever opens it? What if Pharaoh's daughter, the one person close enough to evil to disobey it in the right way, never walks down those steps that morning? There are a few ways this could go, and none are gentle. The river is a dangerous road for a child. A gust, a current, a lurking shape in the water. Too much randomness for a tiny life. But let's follow the most merciful, plausible path for our thought experiment. The basket's drift carries the child to a quiet inlet where Hebrew women draw water. They find him. They hush him. They look over their shoulders. If a Hebrew family takes the child in, they take on a risk larger than a roof and bread. The edict is still active. Whispers travel. Neighbors are interrogated. Yet families do brave things when love demands it. A plan forms. The child never enters a palace. He grows among workers and shepherds, taught with soft hands and low voices, learning to be invisible to patrols and patient with hardship. He learns stories from his elders, about a God who remembers promises, about a patriarch who dreamed of stars, about a brother, Joseph, who once governed this very land. He learns songs that are half lament, half lullaby. He feels two suns, one scorching from above, the other burning quietly inside, a sense that life is meant for more than stacked bricks. But without a palace childhood, certain doors never open. No court tutors teach him hieroglyphs. No royal dinners teach him how to speak in the cadence of power. He never walks colonnades, never learns which official stands where, which phrase makes a vizier nod. And that matters later when the story asks someone to speak face to face with kings. Without the palace, the road to Pharaoh is longer, steeper, and dimmer. So what happens when this Moses, if he survives, grows into a man? Does the wilderness still call him? Does a bush still burn? Maybe. The voice in the wilderness, in the canonical story, did not choose Moses because he knew table manners. It chose him because he was willing to turn aside and listen. Wilderness and wonder do not require palace grammar. But here's the catch. Even if the call comes, the hidden Moses would likely reach for different tools. He might not return to the palace with a brother at his side and signs in his hands. He might organize quietly instead. Small acts of resistance, networks of families ready to move when the time is right. He might become a shepherd for a people long before the sea ever notices. Or, in a starker branch, perhaps he does not survive infancy at all. History is filled with the triumph of one chance moment over 1,000 dangers. Without that one compassionate decision from someone standing near power, maybe the Exodus pauses for a generation. Maybe the cry for deliverance still rises, but the answer moves down a different timeline. Another leader, another season, another Pharaoh. Let's follow both branches for a moment and watch the ripples widen. Branch 1. Moses lives, but he is never adopted into the court. He grows as a Hebrew son, carrying the pain and pride of his people from his first steps. When the call comes, it lands on a man who knows oppression from the inside and has never forgotten the taste of dust. He may still flee to the wilderness after some confrontation. That impulse to right a wrong might be in him no matter where he is raised. And in the wilderness, the same voice could send him back. Only now, he returns as a stranger to the palace, not a prodigal former prince. What changes? The strategy. The signs and wonders might still happen. The purpose of those signs was not to impress officials, but to dismantle the illusion of control. But negotiations could be colder, the corridors harder to navigate. Without memories attached to those marble halls, Moses stands further from Pharaoh's heart. The tension might rise faster. The plagues might escalate sooner, or they might come later, as the hidden leader gathers courage and allies. The Israelite community, in this version, would be more integral to its own rescue from the first step. With a leader shaped entirely among them, more families might be prepared to move quickly as a body. The tradition of Passover, already communal in the canonical story, could feel even more grassroots. The memory would be of a neighbor, not a palace child, setting things in motion when the sign came. That flavor might echo down the centuries. A stronger emphasis on solidarity, on the courage of households, on the idea that deliverance is something you rehearse together long before a sea splits. Yet, the law at Sinai, would it be the same? The 10 words thundered from a mountain do not require a royal childhood to carry them, but the shape of the covenant community might tilt. A leader raised entirely outside the palace might be even more suspicious of centralized power. The tabernacle would still be built, the rituals still given, but the social shape of the camp, its elders, its judges, might lean toward distributed authority earlier. Later, kings would have a harder sell. The memory of deliverance without a palace insider could make monarchy less attractive, less inevitable. Branch 2. The basket drifts, and the child is lost. The change is brutal and simple. Without Moses, who steps into the breach? Aaron? He is already a spokesman in the canonical story, eloquent where his brother hesitates. But Aaron's path is complex. His strengths and compromises show up in equal measure in the wilderness years. Miriam? Her courage and leadership sing through the story, but the culture of that moment might not hand her the same public authority. Someone else then. Someone whose name we never learned because in our timeline, they never had to stand up. If deliverance waits for a different leader, the timeline slides. A new Pharaoh rises. Economic conditions shift. Egypt faces internal stresses. The late Bronze Age is already wobbling in this era. Palaces across the Mediterranean fall like dominoes in slow motion. In a delayed exodus, the exit might align with broader collapse. That could make escape more chaotic and more dangerous, and also more likely to succeed, as empires distracted by fires at home lose grip on their edges. No matter the branch, ask this. How does the world beyond Egypt change when this one moment changes? The ripples are vast. If Moses never enters the palace, the relationship between Israel and Egypt is less intimate and more adversarial from the start. Later cultural memory would paint Egypt with cooler colors. Fewer Egyptian words might find their way into Hebrew. The teaching moments that come from a leader who understands both worlds, the turning aside to explain, to translate between cultures, would be rarer. The line between us and them might draw darker. If Moses is lost and another leader arises later, Israel might leave in a different season entirely. That shifts everything in Canaan. Archaeologists point to waves of small highland settlements in the Iron Age that many link to early Israelite presence. If Israel arrives decades later, those dots on the map migrate. Neighboring peoples, Moabites, Edomites, Philistines, encounter a different neighbor at a different time, perhaps with different strength. Border stories, alliances, and rivalries all rewrite themselves. The Ten Commandments, in either scenario, still stand as a moral mountain in human history, but their delivery context changes the cultural echo. A leader fully of the people might embed justice in even plainer, more communal language from day one. A delayed deliverance might push the codification of law into a time of broader chaos, making the covenant feel less like an orderly ceremony and more like a rescue rope flung across a ravine. Either way, the ethical spine remains, but the muscles wrapped around it, customs, festivals, songs, flex differently. And then there is Passover. Without a palace-raised Moses, the liturgy of remembrance might feature different emphasis. More time remembering the bravery of midwives. More verses celebrating mothers and sisters who hid and watched. More lanterns hung for anonymous neighbors who protected one another. If deliverance comes later under another leader, Passover might anchor to a different night entirely. The meal could include other foods, other symbols, the story tied to a different season. That shift would ripple outward into later faiths that trace their rituals back to that night. Art, music, calendars, all bending slightly to a new key. Zoom out further. Monotheism's rise, so often tethered to the Sinai moment, would still happen, but its path could wander. If Israel's law and worship form later, the surrounding cultures push and pull in different proportions. Perhaps some psalms are never written, replaced by others forged in new valleys. Perhaps some prophets speak in different cities, to different kings, because the interstate map changes. A changed Exodus redirects caravans of meaning as surely as it redirects caravans of people. Pause here. Close your eyes and return to the reeds. The sun stands a little higher now. The current has patience. A hand reaches out, or it doesn't. The world holds its breath either way. And remember, this is not doctrine. This is respectful imagination. We're looking at a cornerstone of a sacred story and asking how the architecture might shift if one brick were moved. Around the halfway point of the daydream, one more possibility peeks in. What if Pharaoh's daughter does see the basket, but fear wins and she looks away? The child survives only because a Hebrew woman quietly wades into danger once more. In that version, compassion still moves the world, just from the margins instead of the palace. The lesson changes. History owes itself not to royal courage, but to the bravery no scribe was invited to record. How would that memory shape a people? Perhaps they would spend more time training children to notice small chances to do right. Perhaps hospitality would sit at the center of everything, because deliverance began at a kitchen table. And what of Egypt? A palace without the adopted Hebrew prince grows a little harder, a little more sealed. The court loses a living bridge, one person who could have been a quiet translator between worlds. In a later Exodus, the plagues might be interpreted differently by Egyptian priests. Without personal ties to a former prince, pharaohs might dig in deeper, seeing only challenge, not plea. The end could be the same, but the hearts involved would be colder. At Sinai, if it still comes through Moses in the first branch, the stutter at the burning bush might weigh differently. A man who never tasted palace polish could lean even more on his brother's voice. The image of leadership that emerges would highlight partnership from the start. Two voices, one mission. That shape could echo throughout Israel's future. Prophets traveling in pairs, leaders taught to delegate early, communities less tolerant of lone strongmen. At the Jordan River years later, when the people finally cross into the land, their imagination for what a leader looks like is altered by origin. A prince-turned-shepherd is one kind of symbol. A shepherd who was always a shepherd is another. Maybe the next generation expects their leaders to smell like sheep first and incense second. Maybe the worst mistakes of monarchy never take root as deeply, because the memory of deliverance is a memory of shared labor, not court negotiation. And in the branch where Moses is lost and another arises, even names shift. We might never know Moses as a name that echoes in synagogues, churches, and mosques. We might instead remember someone else, A person with a name we have to pronounce slowly the first time we hear it. That would change the sounds of poetry, the textures of art, the patterns of lullabies hummed to children falling asleep. Small? Maybe. But the world is a tapestry woven of small threads. If you were to unfold a map of belief on your table and watch the colors wash and bleed, the absence of a princess's compassion in one corner would tint everything. Art from Renaissance painters. No baby in the bulrushes scenes. Cathedrals lose one window and gain another. In film and story, the template of the leader from two worlds might soften, replaced by the leader from one world who learns to listen. Classroom lessons on courage might point first to midwives and sisters, and only then to staff-wielding leaders before kings. Now, a quiet check-in. We've been following Rivers of Possibility for a while. It's a good moment to hear from you, and to keep this series growing with thoughtful voices. Which branch feels more plausible to you? A hidden, Hebrew-raised Moses reshaping the Exodus from the ground up, or a delayed deliverance under a different leader entirely? Share your reasoning in the comments. I read them closely to guide future episodes. And if you're enjoying these respectful what-if journeys through sacred history, tap like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let's return to the heart of the question. Why does this moment matter so much? Because history often turns on compassionate defiance near power. One person, one choice, opens a door that millions walk through later. When that person is absent, the door isn't necessarily closed forever, but the hallway behind it lengthens. More steps, more candles to light along the way. The sister in the reeds, Miriam, stands as a bridge in any version. She is watchfulness made human. Without the princess, her watchfulness has to carry more weight. In a hidden Moses timeline, she becomes not only a witness, but a co-architect of escape culture, teaching songs with double meanings, organizing women to signal when patrols pass, creating rhythms that allow life to grow in cracks. That legacy would shape the identity of the people. Deliverance as a craft, not an event. A thing you learn, a thing you practice, a thing you hand down. Even the imagery of the sea might change. The canonical crossing is a symphony of spectacle, a wall of water, a path of dry ground. In a different timeline, perhaps the miracle comes quieter, a season of tides and winds aligning for an escape at night, told later with the same awe but framed as a patience-built moment rather than a single dramatic split. The theology is the same awe. The storytelling accents shift. Meanwhile, Egypt's own story would bend. A court unchallenged by an insider lingers longer in its certainty. Its priests double down. Its archives record fewer moments of doubt. Centuries later, scholars reading those records would trace a different arc of Egyptian self-understanding, one less tempered by a narrative of loss at the hands of a former royal. That changes how we, today, imagine ancient power learning humility. It changes how often we tell that story in classrooms. And think about language. The word Moses itself is linked to Egyptian roots, to draw out. If that name never enters the Hebrew lexicon as the leader's name, the wordplay that ties name to mission shifts. Another name would carry another echo. Linguists, centuries later, would write different essays. Sermons and stories would climb different scaffolds of meaning. Every culture has a way of saying, "You were drawn out to draw others out." Without Moses, the phrase might be less elegant, or perhaps more so. We don't know, but we feel the tilt. Through all of this, one constant remains: the cry for freedom. Whether Moses is found or lost, whether the palace bridges help or not, the human heart leans toward liberation and covenant. That is the quiet drum under every scene. The sky keeps its promises. The wilderness still has a voice. The people keep walking. So where does that leave us? With a small scene beside a big river and a reminder that the smallest mercies ripple into empires. A princess's choice mattered. A mother's courage mattered. A sister's watchfulness mattered. In our world too, we stand in places where we are the nearest hand to the reeds. We won't always know what our small rescue will become. We may never read our names in any book, but history is not shy about using ordinary moments as hinges. This what if is not here to undo anyone's belief. It's here to help us hold the story with fresh wonder, to see how delicate and how durable it is all at once. Delicate, because a single glance could change the root of a nation. Durable, Because even when one path closes, another opens under the same sky of promise. And maybe that's the reflection to carry into the evening. Whether you stand in a palace corridor or on a muddy bank, whether your voice echoes in marble halls or in a whisper between friends, compassion is a mapmaker. It redraws borders. It invents new roads. It teaches seas and hearts how to part. In any timeline, that truth remains. So, one last image before the credits roll. The Nile at dusk now, the light a gentle amber. The basket rocks, nearly still. Somewhere, footsteps approach. Perhaps royal, perhaps not. The reeds breathe, the world leans in, and the story always waits for a hand.